Happy New Year! Happy 2016! Yay! I don't have any noisemakers or nothing like that. Pretend like that was one of those little waggedy way. May all acquaintance be forgot. Blah, blah, blah. And yada, yada, yada. It's 2016. It's time for a new year. It's time to start it off with a bang, baby. And we got a special guest. So it might go a little bit longer than normal today because he's got one heck of a story. All right? Let's do a new show, shall we? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Laughing with cancer. Let's live a life, not just survive. Laughing with cancer. If you're not laughing, life will pass you by.
Welcome, 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 my friends, to Laughing with Cancer. I'm your host, Elvis Rico, and it is 2016. My goodness, already 2016. Time for a new year. Time for new resolutions. Time for new stuff. Did y'all see the new Star Wars? Speaking of new, oh man, no spoilers. I'm not gonna give it away, but I loved it. I loved it. I wanted the bad guy though. He took off his mask. I wanted him to look a little scarier. You know what I mean? I wanted him to be like, you know, Darth Vader face all jacked up and stuff. But now he took off his mask and he's just like a dorky dude with puffy hair. You know, a lot of hair. I don't know. Kylo Ren. I don't know, but I love the movie. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was like the first Star Wars, just different. Just 2015 instead of 1977 Star Wars. So, and yeah, so that was there. That happened, you know, at the end of 2015. And just now, just a couple days ago, looks like old Cosby's going to get arrested, finally, after 60 people accuse him of rape. That's crazy. But today, we're not going to talk about that nonsense. Today, we have a special guest. Now, our show is going to the show usually goes about, 45 minutes or so. But today, it's going to be a little longer. On today's show of Laughing with Cancer, my guest is Liam Ryan, an ordinary man with an extraordinary story all the way from Ireland. In 2002, Liam was diagnosed with one of the worst cases of head and neck cancer doctors had ever seen. His doctor told him he was the second worst case he had ever seen and that the first case was dead in a month. So what do you do with news like that? How do you go from 0 to 60 in a matter of seconds? You start by having a fighting spirit, and that's just what Liam had. Very few hospitals in the world told him they couldn't offer any hope in a case like his, and he was expected to have only weeks to live. However, Liam is not only a father, husband, son, and brother, but he is a fighter, and he fought his cancer head-on, literally. Liam underwent a life-threatening 12-hour operation followed by 7 weeks of extensive chemoradiotherapy and nearly died in recovery with 2 separate bouts of bacterial meningitis twice and a deep vein thrombosis. Liam was in the hospital for 4 months and simply had no business still being alive at the end of 2002. Now let's fast forward 10 years. And in 2012, on his 10th anniversary of his diagnosis, Liam ran his first marathon post-cancer and wrote a book called Cancer 4, Me 5, After Extra Time. Liam is an inspiration to every cancer patient that at times feels like giving up and throwing in the towel. So please sit back and for the next hour or so, think about what life really means to you and listen to a man who realized in life that the cup of life is never half empty, but always half full. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Liam Ryan. Liam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. What an intro. I hardly recognize myself from it. The best one I've ever had. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you. I was worried that maybe I told Mo you'd be like, well, that's it. That's the story. There you go. But yeah, you have quite the extraordinary story. I mean,
there are so many strands to my story, Rick, but the first of them really is I was effectively anonymous in the world. I was a little architect in a little town in Ireland with my wife and my 3 small boys. My youngest boy, Abe, was only 1. So I was never destined for you and I to be having this conversation 13 and a half years later. And I think the strong part of that little piece is that everybody then feels they can relate to me. You know, I wasn't an Olympic athlete or a huge football star. I was your next door neighbor or somebody on your street. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I've ended up with one of the biggest stories in the world. Really, I had no chance to stay alive in '02, but if I did, it should have been to some very poor quality of life. I mean, I was so strong then, I would have taken blind, deaf, dumb, wheelchair, even mentally impaired. The only gunslinger in town was dead or alive, you know. So,
Yeah.
And through my recovery, then I just began to get emails and feedback, firstly from Ireland, then from Britain, and then from Canada, New Zealand, the US, Australia, all over Europe. And the greatest ones of those, Rick, said, I was giving up until I read your story. So it was around then I realized I am carrying something that not only is huge, but can do great good when it gets out.
Exactly.
So I genuinely feel I have been given a new mission in my second life to tell this story to as many people as I can. So that's why I need guys like you, and I'm delighted somebody like you will just spot this story and say, if I gave that man a platform, there is no end to the good it can do once it goes out all over Arizona and all over the US. So that, in a quick nutshell, is my own little intro into how I'm here today to tell the story that I'm now about to tell.
Right on. So, you're from Ireland. What part of Ireland are you from right now? I know you were raised in a little town called Horseleap.
Horseleap.
Yeah, that's what it was. Horseleap. The story was kind of interesting and how your little town got the name.
That's right. Yes, that's a little village up in the middle of Ireland, if you like. But I was in England for 14 years, and I came back. I'm in County Tipperary. I'm in a lovely little lakeside. They're actually twin towns, Ballina and Killaloe, and the third city is about 15 miles away, Limerick. So we're close to the west coast of Ireland, the Midwest coast. I'll just give you a quick run through from scratch. I was born in a little village in the middle of Ireland called Horseleap, as you say. And after high school, I wanted to become an architect. And so I ended up going to Liverpool in England. And I stayed there for 14 years after that. I worked on in Liverpool. And I married Pam, and we had three boys. So we moved back to Ireland in 1996 to this lovely little town, and this is a good part of the story too, because the medics like to use it to show that cancer can strike anybody, really. Because if we go back to '02 when I was diagnosed, I had never smoked, Rick. I had never carried any weight. I had run 6 marathons, so I was the epitome of somebody who shouldn't get cancer. And they use it from that point of view to show you that, look, this is a completely predatory disease. It doesn't tick any boxes. I became a good little example for them, for other people, of saying, look, cancer can strike anybody.
For those people that think that it's because I did this, it's because I worked
Exactly.
here or something like that, and here you are, healthy as can be, and you got one of the worst kinds of cancer.
Exactly. I like, for instance, I have 3 sisters, and they all smoked, and my parents smoked. So the first people said, why you and not them? And then my response was, well, look, that's the proof that that you can't pin this disease down. It just doesn't conform to what the channels you expect it will go, really. So we'll go back to May '02, and the very first signs, Rick, where I began to get headaches. Now, they were a little bit unusual, and that's probably easy to say in hindsight. They weren't debilitating like a migraine, and they were just a little bit lower in the head. They were kind of across the bridge of my nose. but they were intermittent. They weren't enough to stop me working. So I was a typical man. What did I do? I did nothing. I ignored them for a week. And then eventually my good wife, Pam, kind of gave me two options. She said, you either go to the doctor or we're going to end up getting divorced here. You've got to get this checked out. So I did. I went down to my local surgery here, and lovely, the story with my medical connection start there. I had an absolute lovely doctor here. But at that point, it just looked as I had a sinus infection, and there was no reason to think anything else. So I started antibiotics. When they didn't work, I was eventually referred in to see a dentist just in case I had an abscess in my mouth or something. And when there was nothing there, the thinking was that I did have a sinus infection, but one that was too strong for antibiotics. And what happens then is you're admitted to your local hospital for a very routine procedure that's called a sinus wash, where they literally knock you under for about half an hour or so, and they go into your sinus and they flush out the infection that will be in there. So, of course, Rick, you'll know this from your own case. That's the pivotal weekend in all of these stories, when you get the news.
Yeah. And,
I must admit, I was quite a good patient from kind of day 2 on. I drew a line and got to grips with what was in front of me. But for that singular day when you're told, I think I use a description of, it's like being thrown out of an airplane without a parachute. You, especially as a man, you just have not got a clue what they're telling you. And really, the only equation you have in front of you is cancer equals death. You have no idea what this disease is.
Yeah, a lot of times I'd ask my guests, do you go through that 5 stages of grief, the anger and the depression, yes, and all that, but you basically didn't have that time span to actually go through that. You kind of had to go through it all in a couple of days to figure out what you were going to do.
Exactly. It was so big and it all came so fast that there wasn't even, there wasn't time to dwell in say, a why me state, or we had to respond with action straight away in my case. But I just whipped through. I was admitted to Limerick, my nearest hospital. And again, whenever I tell this story, Rick, although a lot of it is horrendous and very dark, and you will probably have this too, there are amazingly always chinks of little shafts of light in the most unexpected places. And the first of them began when I went into Limerick. I just met 2 of a long line of the most extraordinary people I would meet within the next 2 years, all in the medical profession. There was a wonderful ward sister in Limerick called Carmel O'Sullivan, and she just took me under her wing straight away, initially thinking it was a very simple procedure. And then I met my ENT consultant, John Fenton, from Dingle in County Kerry. And Rick, we just clicked in about 10 minutes. Not dissimilar to yourself and myself right now. We were just good friends. We just knew we got on very well. We were around the same age, had a similar sense of humor. And I think what's even more dramatic in my story is that I went in for this routine procedure, having met these wonderful new people, laughing and joking with them. John Fenton said to me, look, he said, I've done thousands of these. We'll have you down in the morning. We'll whip you in and out. And before you know it, I'll be coming around the next day to tell you what time you're going home at. And he had been in Liverpool and I had been in Liverpool. We were laughing, we were comparing where had you drank and where had you eaten and who did you know. And at the time, Rick, I was also busy as an architect. So I was treating this little 2-night break in a hospital almost like a mini hotel stay. I had a stack of newspapers I didn't get a chance to read in the previous 2 weeks. Pam was bringing me in all kinds of treats from my bedside locker. What was extra dramatic about mine was the fall. I went almost from on a high in the hospital to the news that was going to be broken to me the next day. So the next day came. He brought me down to the theatre. And again, I hardly recognised him all gowned up, but again, we had exchanged a few little pleasantries before I went in, and again, he reassured me that, look, this is a very basic procedure and absolutely nothing to worry about. So that was it, Rick. I went in, I was knocked out. I wouldn't know anything more till the next day when he was coming on his rounds. And as I say, this is the pivotal scene for most of us. And I'll describe it to you fully. I was sitting up in my bed. I was dressed. I could see them coming. And the only issue in my head was, what time do I give Pam a ring to come in and pick me up? And I was actually planning beyond that. I said, oh, well, seeing as she's in the city, we'll go and get something to eat and maybe bring the kids with her or whatever. I was completely in social mode. And then I saw John Fenton coming in. I was in a 2-bed ward with Carmel behind him. And just as they were coming in, I could make out, well, there was actually quite a big entourage behind them. There was 6 or 8 student and house doctors. And as they got to me, I was beaming out a smile, Rick, to greet them as they came in the door. And all of a sudden, it was as if everything went into slow motion. For the smile I was sending out, I was just receiving serious faces in response. And I just went into a state of bewilderment. I said, but I was laughing and joking with these people yesterday, and now they're pretending as if they hardly know me. So he didn't say anything, kept coming, just pulled the curtain around the bed, and he leaned right down into me. He was about 12 inches away, face to face, and he just said, Liam, this is very serious. And he didn't use the cancer word then, Rick. He waited until he had a scan the next morning. But really with his tone and with his expression, and you'll probably recognize that encounter as well, the bottom just fell out of my world. You know, literally, if he said to me then, you're going to be dead within a month, the words would have been the same. I was just absolutely shattered. And I didn't have anything that day because I didn't know where to go to look for anything. I didn't know anything about the news. I tell you, I was such a novice. He eventually mentioned stage 4. And I was such a novice at that time, I thought in my head, that doesn't sound too bad. It must be out of 10. And then somebody had to say to me, Liam, the numbers don't go any higher than 4. You've got the most advanced tumour possible. So the following day, I went to see him in his office, and Pam was with me. And it was at that point he said to me, he said, look, I'm a long time in this game. And he said, I have to tell you now, you are the second worst case I've ever seen. And the worst case was dead in a month. And he said, I've nothing else down for you. He said, the problem you have is you have a hugely aggressive advanced tumour in the middle of your head. It's running around your eye to your brainstem, and it's quite close to your spine.
Oh my God.
It's filling all that soft pocket above the roof of your mouth. And he said, the difficulty in the surgery to remove that, he said, for a start, I don't think there's anybody in the world capable of doing it. But he said, if there is, there's probably only about 4 of them in the world. But he said, the other problem you have is your tumour is so advanced, it won't all be removed surgically. So you're also going to need a radical radiotherapist, somebody who will go completely off the radar just for your case, and perhaps take all kind of risks himself or herself in their diagnosis for you.
Wow.
So he said the difficulty you have is that if they do exist and they are prepared to give you a chance, the chances are the surgeon will be in LA, but the radiotherapist will be in Tokyo. And he said the problem you have is you need the 2 of them in the one place. So at that point, Rick, and I'll go back to being thrown out of an airplane without a parachute. What do you do? The only connection I had with this devastating scenario I had just been launched into was this man standing in front of me. He was the only link to whatever my future could be. And at that point, I knew him well enough, almost as friend to friend rather than as consultant to patient, to be able to say to him, John, if this was you, what would you do? So I knew him well enough to swap roles. So as it turned out, we'd been laughing and joking the previous day about our times in Liverpool. But he said to me his 3 years in Liverpool had been in what he regarded as a centre of excellence for head and neck cancer. And he said, it's probably the one of the best in Europe and on a par with most of what you would find in America. So he said, and obviously speed was of an essence. He said, if I was you, I would go to Liverpool. And the great little chink of light here, Rick, was that because he knew them over there, he was able to get me a referral within a week. I mean, we still might have found Liverpool a month later on the internet or something, but it would have been too late, and we would have not had no contact to get access to it, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So in his assessment, he said, look, you could go searching for perhaps a better surgeon somewhere else, but then you won't have the radiotherapy backup. So when I put the onus on him, he said, if I was you, I would go to Liverpool. So within a week, he got us a referral to see Simon Rogers, who is the head, the chief maxillofacial surgeon in Aintree University Hospital, and David Husband, who is the head radiotherapist, in a second hospital in Liverpool, Clatterbridge Hospital. And the two of them interviewed me in a room in the Royal Hospital in Liverpool, and Pam was with me. So they now had scans of my tumour, and for the first time I was in the hands of two people who were totally familiar with a case like mine. So Simon spoke first and explained the complexities of the surgery involved, and how literally, apart from your head being your computer with brain, eyes, ears, nose, basically most of the main functions of the human being, of course, the nerves from everything else in the body has to go through the head as well to get to your brain. So the nerves that control your legs, your hands. So the message was, removing the tumour is only a small part of what we have to deal with. We then have all the risks and the dangers of massive surgery to your head that will put everything else at risk. So he was kind of hinting that, look, if you do survive, the chances are we may solve your cancer, but you will have such a poor quality of life afterwards because of the massive impact of what we have to do to go after that cancer.
Wow.
And then the radiotherapist spoke, and he just explained how he would follow up then he would try and establish where the tumour was still remaining, and he would program as much radiotherapy as I could take to hopefully extinguish whatever tumour was left inside. So what is lovely to live on, Rick, is that apart from the physical diagnosis and looking at me personally, these two men were also weighing up in their own minds how I was, what kind of state I was in to take the treatment they were talking about. At this point, they hadn't okayed me as a runner, if you like. And so Simon Rogers told me that years later. He said, we were assessing also you as what kind of patient you could be. And the great news on that one is I came across quite well on that. They said, this guy knows what he's at. He knows the risks here. He knows it's a life and death scenario. He knows that he could come out of this with a very poor result and be severely handicapped or mentally impaired. But he said he's impressing us that he's ready for that. He just wants to be given a chance to take this on. So a lovely background spin on what they were saying, Rick, is that the two of those men also believed I had no chance. But both Pam and myself had impressed them to such a degree that I wanted to take this on, and I was prepared for whatever the outcome was going to be, that they felt they had to give me a chance.
Now from this point on, from when you were first told till this point now, how long had that been?
Just over a week.
And did the whole family already know? Were you able to break it down to your kids what was going on, or how?
The kids were very young, 5, 3, and 1. So we didn't tell them yet, and in fact we also didn't tell too many people in the community, because I suppose at this point we didn't know what we had to tell. We didn't know if treatment had been okayed for a start.
Oh, okay.
We picked out a few very essential individuals. We told the principal in the school the boys were in, and I told a couple of other close friends that I knew would handle it properly, as in be strong and say the right things for you, as opposed to going to pieces or whatever. So yes, and our immediate families knew, of course. So at the great news at the end of that, this is about an hour later, the two of them looked at each other. There was nodding and winking going on that I didn't know about. And they said, look, let's give this guy a chance. Even though both of them didn't think I was going to make it. So at that point, they said, look, we're prepared to give you a shot at treatment here. And I was quite strong by then, Rick. What I didn't want to be was kind of soft-soaped, and they had shown me like the serious consequences of what they were now about to do. So I said to them, I'd like you both to tell me what you think my chances are of coming through on this. And they said to me, Liam, you have a 5% chance of coming out of this alive, just alive. Now, again, there's a lovely P.S. on that story, Rick. Simon Rogers told me years later, Liam, we made that up. You were nowhere near 5%. You were minus 500%.
Oh my God.
He said, and you can see what they're doing. He said,
Yeah.
We couldn't say no to you. We had to give you something to aim for. So, we have lovely little social discussions years later, where he'll feed me a little bit more that he couldn't tell me at the time. So when they said the 5%, they went to leave the room to give us time to decide, because the difficult bit was there was a risk I would not recover from the surgery at all. So I'd be trading in the 3 weeks or the month or the 6 weeks I had left, And I'll give you just a quick little story on that and how quick the brain operates at a time like that. Between them telling me that they'd okayed me for treatment and the 5% and leaving to leave the room, it was about, I'd say, 6 paces to the door. So we had to decide, are we going to go for this treatment here and possibly risk that I would never come round afterwards? So what do you do, Rick, with 3 weeks to live? And whatever was going on in my head, the thing that came to mind was you'd go on a round the world cruise, okay? So by the time they were taking their third pace, I was on the deck of a luxury ship somewhere off the coast of New Zealand with a glass of champagne in my hand, all right? And then my mind said to me, Lee, what's in your head? And you know what was in my head, Rick?
What's that?
My head said to me, what the hell are you doing here? Those two men in Liverpool gave you a chance, and here you are toasting your life away. So I knew at that point I would not enjoy a single second of my 3 weeks extra or of my world cruise or of whatever I did, that I had been given a chance, and it was my job to take that chance. So just as they were putting their hand on the door handle, I said, lads, there is no need to go. The decision is already made. If you're telling me you have faith in me to give me a chance at this, well, the green light is on. It's systems go, So they're lovely. I obviously have a great bond with all my consultants, but they're lovely discussions we have. And he'll tell me why he had to say it a certain way or leave things out. And then I'll respond with telling him what went through my head at that particular point in time once he had said what he'd said, So, of course, by now, whether imagined or not, Rick, I could feel this aggressive tumour in my head. Literally, it was like an alien trying to kill me, if you like. So as soon as they said, we are agreeing you for treatment, I literally wanted it to be tomorrow. But again, the whole realization of the learning curve I was on about the whole medical profession, my operation was so big, it took a month to prepare. So the earliest it could be was a month's time. So we then went back to Ireland, and I was now in that zone of knowing treatment was approved, but I had this month to prepare and to get ready. So by then I adopted the role of, well, look, it's my job here to help everybody else help me, to be the best possible patient I can be. And I said, there's two key areas there. There's my head and there's the rest of my body. So I went out, Rick, and I ran every day. Now, I have been a runner on and off over the years, but to no great extent. And I just decided I want this body to be the best possible specimen it can be when it goes on that slab for them. I want it to be as fit as it possibly can. And of course, running was the perfect activity, because when you run, you also have plenty of time to think. You know, it's not like where you're cycling or rowing, where you're also doing another activity. So running actually ticked both boxes, and as I ran then, I just got mentally strong. And of course, running is also good for that, because running is never easy. So it was making me strong mentally anyway. And again, Rick, I just said, I'm no use to anybody if I'm going to be bawling and crying, and I've got to deal with every eventuality in my head before I go over to them as a patient, right up to living and dying, or I mean, you've seen pictures of me. I wear an eye patch. Disfigurement was a certainty. A couple of lovely little descriptions as well. I can only open my mouth half an inch, but what a miracle, Rick, that I can speak perfectly. And it's almost as if I've been left my voice to tell the story. So because they took out an awful lot of bone in my jaw and my cheek. But I'll get to that in the description. So I performed well in that month. When I'm talking to newly diagnosed people or other cancer patients, I like to kind of stress that line on them, that look, it's not a case of you lying back here and letting everybody treat you. You're on the team as well. It's your job to be the best patient for them, you know. And whatever you feel, I think you need an activity. You need to take your head somewhere. It could be golf, it could be walking, it could be swimming, but you need somewhere to go for those couple of weeks before you begin treatment. And I think it's a two-stage process. You get your body as in the best condition you can, but more importantly, probably you get your head straight. So that's, I feel I did use that month quite well, and made a good preparation personally to give it, to make sure I was in the best position to give it the best shot, because I knew the odds were huge against me. So I had to present myself as best as I possibly could to give myself any chance, really.
Well, that, and also that they said the other patient was dead within a month. I mean, you must have been worried sick. That had to weigh heavy on you, waiting in that month for treatment.
Yes. I guess there was just such relief. You know, as a cancer patient, all you want is your chance. And later on, Rick, the eventual outcome almost became lesser than that for me. If I did go down, I wanted to go down in the boxing ring with my gloves on. Or, you didn't want to go down with no possibility of treatment. So it's funny how the actual fight breaks up into different, stronger little components, and you kind of focus on the ones that. So I wasn't as concerned about that second worst patient statement at that point. I was just hugely focused on the chance I had been given, and knowing that even, as you say, if I had survived the month, there were bigger risks were to come once I went on the slab as well.
Right.
I used narrow focus all the time. I just didn't allow myself to get fazed by, when will I go to a wedding in a hotel again? When will I ever go to a Super Bowl? My case was so severe, it was literally, Liam, be alive this time tomorrow, be alive this time next week. Try and sit up in the bed for the first time in 2 months. Try and sip a glass of water. And I use nice little analogies, both in the book and when I talk of, the inches will make the mile. Like when I would run over the years and run badly, which I would do more often than not, I used to adopt this little strategy of, don't worry about the mile or the 10 miles or the 26 miles. Run what you see. Run to around the next bend, then run to over the top of the hill in front of you, then run the stretch. And if you keep doing that, the finish line will come to you. So I applied exactly the same tactics, Rick, to long, slow, difficult recovery. And it was just one little bit of progress for each day that came. You know, have a tube taken out, sit up for the first time, or I didn't worry about when will I walk again, when will I, do lots of normal activities again. And that kept me strong. So I know I'll describe that a bit more once we get to that stage. But so we're up now to the point of going to Liverpool for the surgery. Do you want me to carry on, or anything
no.
you want to interject?
No. Go ahead. Continue.
Okay.
I'm fascinated with the whole thing.
So I went over to Liverpool. Now, Liverpool was a great referral for me because Pam is from Liverpool, so I had plenty of old college friends there, and we had her family as well. I want to talk a little bit about my own community at this stage. By now, they all knew. And sometimes in a case like this, Rick, less is more. If I was in a city, I would have known less people. But I live in a wonderful, wonderful community here. And if John Fenton had said to me, you've got to go to Buenos Aires, or you've got to go to Moscow, or you've got to go to Tokyo, this community I live in would have stopped at nothing to try and fundraise to send me wherever he said, you know.
Yeah.
So I was lucky, and even America would have been easier because everybody speaks English, for instance. So, but Liverpool was a great referral because it's not too far away, and a city I knew from before. So I arrived anyway. I had a little procedure about 3 days before the main surgery, when I got a peg tube inserted, because I wouldn't be able to use my mouth for many months after the surgery. So I was going to be fed directly into my stomach. And just before I left, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. We had a fabulous night here in the town that I'm from. And I described this in the book. And I was very strong by then, Rick. I didn't want that night to be a wake, if you like. I didn't want people to come sad or... Now, to be honest, it was obviously in the back of all our heads that this was likely to be the last time we would all be in the same room again. It was down in a local pub. And I did a very clever thing before that night to make sure it went the way I went. I wrote a little funny futuristic poem about what the town would be like when I came back, you know, and I kind of had it say New York. Buildings would be, all of a sudden they'd be 15 stories tall, and Elvis Rico would be a millionaire, and you know, I had everybody named in it, and had a great projection of their future, if you like. So the first thing I did on the night was got up. There was a band playing, and I got up and I read out this poem. And there was a clear message from that not only were we able to laugh and joke tonight, but also that I was very strong here, and that I wanted everybody in the room to have a great night and to get into my camp as a supporter all the way. That, you know, tonight was not a night for sadness or worry. It was, you're all on my team, and by God, as long as there's a chance here, this cancer is going to be taken down, kicking and screaming every single road until there's only one left, you know. And I actually solved the problem. I made it a great night by doing that, you know, and people came up to me, and I'm sure there were things unsaid too, I'm sure, but at the same time, it really worked. So I had a great send-off from here before I left. That put me in great frame of mind then when I got to Liverpool. So, as I say, I had the peg tube inserted, then I was back out for 3 days, and then I was taken in. And the big surgery in this hospital is done the first Monday of every month. The huge operations, there's only one done a month. So, I mean, they were fantastic people. They had rushed me through to put me next on the list. So, you'll relate to a lot of this too, as will everybody listening who has been in the same scenario. I remember the bed, the trolley coming to pick me up on the ward. I remember the journey down to the theatre. In that hospital, there's a tiny little multi-denominational church, very small, buried kind of in the bowels of the hospital, if you like. And would you believe I remember passing it on the trolley. And again, little pools of strength, Rick. I remember just gripping my fist, and as I passed the door of that little church and vowing, I said, look, if I make this journey, if I come back this journey again, I promise you'll be my first port of call. I'll go in and say thanks, you know. So you grab everything in your life that makes you strong, you know. Your running, your perspective, your faith, your friends. In my case, they were all essential pieces in the jigsaw. And literally, if any piece in that jigsaw was missing, I wouldn't be here to have this conversation with you today. So, you know, I have a great spread of appreciation of that entire jigsaw, if you like, of everything in my life that I feel was essential to me coming through. You know, on the few days when I had nothing myself, you'd get a text from somebody, or you'd hear somebody had lit a candle for you, and my mind would kick in and say, Liam, you can quit for yourself, but you can't quit for them. You know, so it was as if there was all kinds of mechanisms falling into place to make sure the fight never ceased, you know.
Right.
And I suppose that's the kind of stuff I wanted to write in the book, Rick. Fortunately, in any book, you can't make any promises, but what I felt I could do was tell people all those little mechanisms I used that kept me strong, you know, and in the hope that they would give somebody new ideas, or, oh, I didn't think of doing that, or, you know. So anyway, down I went, and Simon Rogers was there, and I got knocked out. Now, I didn't know anything about it until about 2 days later. I had 2 days in intensive care when I was literally more machine than man. I was breathing through a tracheostomy. I was being fed directly into my stomach. But I do remember coming around in intensive care, and of course that was a huge milestone in itself. It meant I had survived the surgery. And then 2 days later, I was brought back to the ward, and Simon Rogers came, and he sat on the end of my bed. And he just spent about 10 minutes talking to me. I couldn't speak because I had the tracheostomy. And he described everything they had done. And he told me, as surgery goes, it was as big as it comes. It was on a par with what you'd have after a major car accident. And he said, they cut me from my bottom of my ear, across to the bottom of my nose. They broke my jaw, and then they cut me down to my Adam's apple. Mm. And then they peeled away all of my jaw. They literally opened me up there. And then he said the next bit was like, if you want to work on the engine in your car, there's a problem with your engine, but you can't actually get to physically work on it until you disconnect it from all the various hoses and pipes and wires it's connecting to the rest of the car. None of them are have any problem or doing anything wrong, but they're preventing you getting to what you want to do. He said it was exactly the same with me. He said they then had to sever all of the many nerves and veins and connections going through my head up to my brain from the rest of my body. And he said that in alone was extremely critical work, because they had to very carefully sever them and then just put them away for later reconnection. So then they went in after the tumour as much as they could see. They took out half the roof of my mouth, half my top set of teeth. They took out all of the soft tissue in my sinus, going round the top of my mouth to both my brainstem and my spine. By then, the tumour had infected a lot of my cheekbones, so they removed a lot of bone from my cheek. And I suppose that was always the bit they never knew how much they were going to do until they had gone in. So they never really knew how well my jaw would go back together. They had prepared me for not being able to speak and eat and drink after the surgery, and that I would have been happy to have been alive to accept that. So he said they were reasonably happy with that they had surgically removed as much of the tumour as they could see. But he said what pushed my odds up so high were in the normal scenario, you would remove not just the tumor, but an extra centimeter of tissue all around as an extra precaution. And he said they weren't able to do that in my case because it was backed up to my brainstem and my spine. So there was whole areas of tumor that they couldn't get that little extra cushion around. So that's what was leading them to believe that there is going to be a substantial amount of tumor left behind, and we'll be relying on radiotherapy then as a primary treatment rather than as the more normal secondary backup treatment, just in case. And really, I think John Fenton said to me at an early stage, that's really what's giving you no chance, you know, that the chances of the radiotherapy taking out the live tumor that's left behind is very high risk. So anyway, at that point, they were happy they had as much of the tumor out as they could get out. But I now obviously had a massive hole in my face. So at that point, they cut me across the top of the hip, and they removed a substantial slice of bone from my hip, which they reshaped to rebuild the cheek. They then took lining out of my stomach to pad out the big hole that was in my cheek, and also to reseal the roof of my mouth, which thankfully worked. That's called a bung. That's called a flap. And if it doesn't work, you would have like an artificial denture, if you like, and that's called a bung. So once they had that done, then they had to, of course, reconnect the engine to the car and all the nerves coming up. And then finally, it took them 130 stitches to stitch me back up from the ear back to the Adam's apple. And they were so small to minimize any facial scarring. So the whole procedure took 12 hours. And he said in the final hour, everything was just as critical and risky and dangerous as it was in the first hour. And he humanly said we were all exhausted. And again, Rick, I'm often embarrassed by how little I know about what these people do. But I often think of anybody on a 12-hour shift in an office, in a restaurant. It's a long day.
Right.
But these guys were 12 hours in the middle of another human being's head when literally millimeters were high risk, you know. So as he spoke, I just had the most amazing appreciation and empathy and actual embarrassment, really, that I knew so little of what they did. You know, if you have a bad day, your radio show doesn't go out properly. I'm an architect. If I have a bad day, the planners don't like my design. If they have a bad day, somebody dies, you know. Yeah. So, and you'll know this too, a lot of the rewards are the whole newfound appreciation you have of people in the medical industry. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger for me, you know, saving or improving people's lives. They just do the ultimate work of all.
And you were able to understand when he was talking to you, even though you couldn't speak. You were still able to understand that was a plus, of course, because they said you might not even be able to understand what was going on.
Absolutely. Yes, I was, and I suppose like radiotherapy is a lot more invisible. The surgery, because it's so visible, is easier to understand. And then when he used the little analogy like the engine of the car, you know, he made it very easy to describe what he was doing. So I was back in the ward then, and as I say, I was effectively more machine than man, and they were probably some of the worst days. I couldn't sleep. The tracheostomy was very, very difficult and uncomfortable, and I just was trying to kind of past those days, you know, and I found they were the first real test of my resilience as a good patient, or, you know, how are you going to cope with massive discomfort and pain? And I used that. I said, Liam, your only enemy here is time. You know, in a week's time, all of this will be hugely improved. You know, your tubes will be gone. You'll be sitting up again. But there was no distractions. I couldn't watch TV or read a newspaper. So you had to be very mentally strong to cope with that very difficult confinement of those early days of recovery, really. So they were a big test, but again, you focus on what you have, and the big have was I was alive, and I was so strong then, Rick. I would have taken anything. I would have taken, as I say, look, I'm happy wherever this recovery gets me back to. I will take that. I can see now, years later, if I couldn't talk to you now, for instance, I didn't have the gift of speech, how much more frustrating it would be. But back then, as I say, life and death were all that were on the table. So as long as I was alive, I couldn't complain. I was winning and cancer was losing. And then just from then on, back to the run what you see, gradually I adopted this very narrow focus of, look, Liam, one little bit of progress for each day. And I remember, I think 2 days later, a nurse came and she took out a tube off my foot. I think it was an anesthetic feed for the operation. And again, I just clenched the fist and I said, 1 gone, 12 more to go. It was very much that piecemeal, strong mentality.
Yeah.
And so literally then the inches did begin to make the mile. My recovery, day by day, there was little elements of progress, and I began to get back. And I don't know about you, Rick, but a double thing working against you then is you can feel very subhuman, really, and you're actually itching to get back to doing very simple things again, like going to the toilet or sipping water. Just so you'll always get little things coming in the back door at you, to try and eat away at your strong mentality as well. But again, a plus side of that was, for the first time in my life, Rick, I never appreciated half the things my body does on a daily basis. The simple things, my 10 fingers, my 2 legs, let alone something complicated like driving a car or walking onto an airplane to fly to New York. And until you're denied them, you don't really know what it means to be able to scratch your nose or lift a cup of coffee to your lips,
Right.
So the, when I speak to corporate groups now, I give them perspective in spades. I say, you all think you have problems because your investments aren't doing too well, and I say, you just need to reconnect with the incredible machine your body is every day, but by just doing the simple things,
Right.
So I'm convinced in our store of resolve, the mentality brings that with it, that it also makes you appreciate to keep you strong, that you appreciate what you have more than what you've been denied, So I found all these new sides of me were emerging on this hospital bed every day. And almost they were coming from nowhere with the sole intention of keeping this guy strong, keeping his mind in the right place for it to ensure he is a good patient,
Yeah.
So within 2 weeks, I had a physiotherapist at that point, and I was back doing little bits of walking. Within 2 weeks, Rick, I looked to be about to break all kinds of records for the recovery I was making. They literally couldn't believe. And I was beginning to thank my running for this now, because I was reasonably fit at this point. And it was almost too good to be true. And of course it was, because out of the blue, I got meningitis. And the reason for that was, obviously, in the surgery, they had opened up everything up to my brain, so I was wide open. So in all honesty, it was probably not preventable, So it was Pam who picked it up. She noticed coming in on a daily basis that I was receding somewhat. I just wasn't as lively and as responsive as I had been. And she said it to the nursing staff initially, and in fairness to them, they just thought, look, he's still completely whacked from the massive surgery. But she knew. She said, no, there's more going on here. So, and of course, as you know, the family and the parent and the partners, play a huge role. They're unsung heroes, because the only person in the hospital they have to care about is you, whereas the nursing staff or the doctors have another 20 or 30 people on the ward. So they're very important people, I think, as well, to be listened to and to pick up little signs that they may see. So within 10 minutes, the doctor did come, and lo and behold, initially they thought I had hydrocephalus, which would be water on the brain. And I kind of went from the frying pan to the fire. The good news was it wasn't hydrocephalus, but the bad news was I had bacterial meningitis. So I was rushed to the neuro wing of the hospital, critical. Within minutes, I think of it being fatal. They got me drugged up on the IV. I was completely comatose at this stage. I didn't know. I was gone for 2 days. I didn't know any of this was going on. But by the time I came round, it was under control. The medication had it dealt with, and I was a bit tough mentally because I had regressed a few. I was back on the peg tube, and I found some of the setbacks a bit harder to deal with because you're so focused on the main enemy. You're often not ready for the ones that slip in the sideways at you. But I got over that too, and I got myself properly set again, and said, look, Dean, back to being. Your job is to be the best patient you can be here to help everybody else get you out of here. So another 2 weeks, and then I was released from the hospital. And that was a huge milestone, Rick. Because just to get back out in the real world. My cousin lived in Liverpool, so I stayed with her. She's also a doctor, which was great.
Is this the cousin that you mentioned in in your book, the one you were so close with?
That's right.
Oh,
That's
okay.
right. So I that was a huge godsend to have a relative in the same city. So now it was a question of just getting a little bit stronger to begin to start radiotherapy. The radiotherapist wanted to start as soon as he possibly could, because the fear was whatever tumor was left, the longer time you gave it, you were giving it more of a chance to reestablish itself and reform.
Right.
So the meningitis was already a setback because that had knocked me back 2 weeks. And then one day in my cousin's house, I noticed my leg begin to swell. And again, I'm afraid I did the man thing. I just ignored it. I thought, oh, look, it must be just swelling from the surgery. But it got bigger and bigger. And when she saw it, she went mad at me, and rightly so. And an ambulance was called straight away. And I was rushed to another hospital in the city centre. And I had a deep vein thrombosis. And again, it was, I don't know where the clot was at that point, but it wouldn't have been, if it was left for much longer, it would have got to the heart and I would have been dead.
Now, what exactly is a deep vein thrombosis? I mean, I read deep vein thrombosis. It sounded like a heavy metal band to me,
All right. It's effectively a clot that forms in one of your arteries, and it'll be carried by the blood as it makes its way back to the heart. And of course, if it gets to the heart, you'll die at that point with a heart attack.
Oh, okay.
So it's caused by a slowdown in the blood flow, and that's why you get it on long haul flights or whatever traditionally when you're at altitude or. So and then they're able to medicate to dissolve it if you're caught in time. So that was another setback, but thankfully I was released within the day. I was back out, and then about a week later, radiotherapy did start. And chemoradiotherapy, I had 3 sessions of chemo as well. And again, Rick, I did well there. And I think the difference there was I got such a lift from being back out in the real world. Although I was feeble and weak and slept about 3 times a day, I just was so relieved to have been unhooked from the machines and to have left the hospital ward and the hospital food. I think I was in a really good positive frame of mind for radiotherapy. I mean, they warned me it would burn, and the likelihood was I would eventually go back on the peg tube because my mouth would swell. But luckily enough, it didn't. I toughed it out, and I had extensive radiotherapy. I had 7 weeks, very high doses. And I had the mask. I don't know if you're familiar with radiotherapy to the head area. it's like science fiction. The machines are programmed. They hover over your head. The angle that they penetrate you at have been worked out to the millimeter precisely. So the only way they can ensure every day that they hit exactly where they want them to go, they make a perspex mask for you, and you're literally bolted to the table. So anybody listening with who's had radiotherapy to the head will know exactly what I'm talking about. And of course, a lot of people are don't like them or throw them away. And I always kept my mask as a little trophy, because it's such a part of the story. And although I didn't like the peg tube, or I didn't like the tracheostomy, again, my mind made me override these things and adopt them as part of me, and said, look, Liam, that tracheostomy is keeping you alive. That radiotherapy mask is keeping you alive. So they became like my hand or my foot,
Right.
And when I speak to people, I tell them, move into that channel. You have enough things working against you without you being grumpy or taking a poor reaction to something. Embrace everything, because that mask was made for you. That tracheostomy is connected for you. It's not. I know it might be painful, but it's there to keep you alive. So I just try and switch people into that mentality as opposed to working against them. You know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
Are we okay? Am I too long or
no? The good thing about having a podcast is that I can go as long as I want. It depends on how long the listeners want to listen. So, no, you're doing great.
Okay, well, a couple of little anecdotes then on radiotherapy. Now that I was released from the hospital, I began to get lots of visitors coming from Ireland over to see me, and that was fantastic. Now, as I say, the partners and the wives and the husbands are the unsung heroes, but nothing beats a new face popping around the door, or so little things like that are also very important, because they'll lift your spirits. So I had lots of visitors. I had enough energy per day to maybe make an hourly little visit to a restaurant for a cup of coffee or to a pub or something. So I really grasped being human again and being back out in the real world. People would offer to go up and buy me a drink, and I'd actually want to go up to the bar myself to buy the drink, to be able to do the physical activity of talking to the barman and putting my hand in my pocket to pay for the drink.
Yeah.
I was amazed how you lose touch with all these very simple little things you do every day, that as soon as they're denied to you, how you really need to start doing them again to feel, to be a full human again, kind of thing.
Right.
So, and then in my radiotherapy sessions, you had an hourly slot, and it was kind of first come, first serve on that basis. And I think there was 6 or 7 patients, and you were given your hour 12 to 1 or 1 to 2, whatever it was. So we formed lovely social connections with those patients. They were mainly elderly women with breast cancer, if I remember rightly. But they were your little group. And what transpired there, Rick, was... And again, I think any cancer patients listening will relate to this. The most unbelievable black humor came out of nowhere, and almost as if only we could crack the jokes. But what transpired in those little sessions was, first of all, a recognition that we all had the ultimate disease. Okay,
Right.
so we were looking down on people with TB or with cirrhosis of the liver. We had the Rolls Royce of diseases, and then it broke down even further. Those of us in the head and neck department started to look down on all of the rest, basically, and we especially had. Now, this is a black joke between ourselves. We had no time for people with breast cancer or testicular cancer. Chop them off. What's wrong with you? Just go and chop them off. We can't chop our heads off. So, and I'm back to the little chinks of light in the blackest of holes. We all laughed, and it was it was fantastic. It was hugely funny between ourselves, and we all knew it wasn't meant. But here we were, laughing and joking and ribbing each other about your cancer isn't as big as mine, and they came from nowhere. Those little elements of social connection and humor, and and it led me to believe that I'm sure, in the trenches of the First World War, there was probably somebody cracking jokes, knowing that in 2 minutes we're all going up over the edge and 99% of us are going to be shot. That
Right.
humor will creep in, and it probably has a role to play. It distracts you. It keeps you strong.
I remember exactly how that feeling is, because when I was doing chemo, I was an Elvis impersonator for 15 years. So a lot of the times with a lot of the other people that were worse off than I was doing the chemo, I'd do some Elvis and sing some Elvis to them and just crack some jokes with them about him and just kind of keep everybody's spirits up. So I can understand where you're coming from with that.
It's fantastic, and it's important because it's a distractor. It stops them dwelling or thinking about the stuff that's worrying them or whatever. So 7 weeks of radiotherapy, and it went quite well. There was a worry that I would have been readmitted to the hospital to complete it, and I wouldn't have liked that because I'm beginning to get used to being back out in the real world again. But that didn't happen. And then in my radiotherapy sessions, Dave Husband, he used to review you on the Friday at the end of every week and just see how you were getting on. And I think the mind was very strong at this point, Rick, in that from the setbacks in the surgery with the meningitis and the deep vein thrombosis, I had now kind of closed that door. I had made myself be ready for setbacks. So on the very final session with them on the last Friday of the 7 weeks, I was in my head was telling me, look, Liam, he's going to say to you here, he needs to do 2 more weeks with you, or he needs to do another scan or another bout of chemo. He said, look, don't go into that and be expecting you're going to be on the first boat home. Just be ready for bad news. So I did. I went in saying, right, I'm prepared to go another couple of weeks if I have to. But at this point, I was getting a little bit homesick. And I said, if it goes longer than that, I will be a bit disappointed, all right. And out of the blue, Rick, he said, you have performed amazingly well. He said, we don't know how you've stood up to what's been thrown at you without severe swelling in the mouth or without being readmitted. He said, you have taken all we have given you and more. He said, I'm delighted to say to you, you're done. Your treatment is over. You can go home. And as you know yourself, Rick, that's another huge milestone. So now I had not only survived the surgery, now I had survived the 2 treatments. So we had a lovely little meal in Liverpool with all friends and family the next night. And then the following day, we had the car with us. So we loaded up the car and I left my cousin's house and we drove down and we got the ferry from Liverpool back to Dublin. And the milestones are beginning to clock up now. I mean, that there would have been a huge belief that I never would have seen Ireland again. And it was also probably buried in me deep down somewhere as well if I looked hard enough. So that to get on that ship was a huge achievement, really. And by now, I mean, I was still obviously feeble, but I was...
You were alive.
Well,
and you survived.
Plus, most of the things were in place. I was talking, I was seeing. I can see more with the one eye than I ever did with the previous 2. So the question mark now was the strength, and was how much I would get back into the real world, really. But we would take all that on as it came. So back to Ireland, and as I was still very tired, very exhausted. Again, what I say to people, as the patient, you hugely identify with the surgery because it's so visible and it's more understandable. As I say, there's something in there and we're going in to get it and we're going to take it out. The radiotherapy is much more the silent assassin. It's more engineering than it is medicine, really. But in my case, the scars would heal eventually, but the one that was waiting for you 2, 3, 4 years down the line was radiotherapy. When I was going to be exhausted still 3 years later, that was the radiotherapy rather than the surgery. So
Right.
that's kind of the phase I was moving into now. So for the next 6 months, I was very low on energy. I would get up for 2 or 3 hours at a time and go back to bed. But after that, began to get a little bit more active. And it was at that time, Rick, I was getting a bit frustrated and a bit bored with just pure convalescing. I wanted to do something a little bit more taxing. You know, I wouldn't have had a lot of energy now, say, to read a full newspaper but I wanted, you were itching to, and this was part of returning back to being a human being again. And I'd been out a couple of times and I had told little bits of the story. And so around then I just said, if you don't write this down, you'll remember the main bits. You'll remember Simon Rogers and Dave, but you'll forget the little nurse who brought you your first glass of water, that was your first drink, or, you know. So I said, at that point then I said, again, it ticked both boxes. It would preserve the story for myself, and it would get me back doing something that was in the real world, like working at a keyboard. And of course it was perfect because I could do a half an hour and save it and leave it and not get back to it for 2 or 3 days. Then I could remember something that was earlier, scroll back through it, insert that. So over about another 4 months, I wrote an 8-page account of what I had been through. And without that, Rick, I think, again, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because I only wrote that for myself. And I never wrote it with the intention of it. I didn't know the power it contained. But a few friends and neighbours heard about it and just said, could I read that thing you've written? So they read it and they were all taken with it. Then it got passed on to, they said, can I pass it? A friend of mine has just been diagnosed. So within a year, Rick, I began to get emails from all over the world, from New Zealand, as I say, from Canada, from the US, of people that script had got to. And they were the ones that started to say, look, I was giving up until I read your story. So it was around then I began to realize, although I'm a little man in a little town in Ireland, for some reason I have a story here that is as big as anywhere in the world, you know. And when at this point I was thinking, no, you know, that goes to somebody from LA or New York or London, or it goes with the big city that it fits.
Right.
But I suppose, but as I started out saying, that's not cancer. Cancer goes to young, old, rich, poor, men, women. It doesn't conform to any preconceived notions, really. So,
exactly.
So it was when I began to get those responses, I realized you are carrying something extraordinary here, Liam. And I suppose what kicked in then nicely was almost the belief, Rick, that you, as if none of this is happening by accident, you're still alive, you can speak, you can write this wonderful story that is uplifting people by just hearing it, without you doing any more. I'm not telling them what to do, or I'm just telling them what I did, really.
Exactly.
And so around then, the thoughts of, and I've never been a great reader, Rick, to be honest, I thought I've got to get this down in some form that's passable, that even when I'm not here, that the story will be left behind. And of course, even with all our technology in this day and age, the best way to do that still is to write a book. So now it still took a good few years after that. I set up 2012 as a big year because it was 10 years on, and I got back to running, which of course was another huge milestone. So I said, wouldn't 2012 be a great year to hit the 2 last big boxes that are left unticked up? By then I was back working to run your first marathon post-cancer and to write a book. So we're speeding through a bit now, but I was fully back to work at that point. And really what was kicking in then, Rick, was that my survival in itself, to be alive, was probably a multi-miracle. But
Right.
my actual recovery had left it in the halfpenny place. You know, my recovery has now become the huge story, and even the length of my life. You know, 13, nearly 14 years on. I know that they don't say this one too often to me in Liverpool, but they're amazed I've lived this long. You know, it's probably likely to come back at some point. I don't mind in that regard, in that it's all been a bonus. I should have died many times in 2002, so how can I complain when I've done so well for so long?
And the marathon that you did, how long of a marathon was it? Was it
26 miles. And,
oh my goodness.
And I'm proud to say, Rick, I ran it all, but at a very slow pace. It took me, would you believe that it took me 5 hours and 22 seconds, and the 22 seconds annoyed me more than the 5 hours. If it was 5 hours and 22 minutes, I wouldn't mind it, but it's so close to being a 4-hour marathon. But it didn't matter. And my consultant from Limerick, my original ENT consultant, was at the finish line waiting for me. And of course, we had a fantastic moment, you know, when I crossed the line.
Wow.
And I've also run with my surgeon in Liverpool. He's a great runner, but I've done a couple of 10Ks in Liverpool with him. And again, that's lovely, because we've come right around the circle to be, rather than surgeon and patient and less than 5% chance, to be runner by runner, you know, to be equal again, you know.
Exactly.
So I delight in all these lovely little subplots that have come off my story, you know.
And what,
as I say, yep.
I was going to say, what about the tumor now? Do you show signs of anything? Do they, when you go for your doctor checkup, do they say you're still doing great, Liam? Everything looks awesome.
I'll give you a little bit on that, Rick. And again, it's an example of you grasp hold of your scenario and you make it the best there is. When I'd finished that last day of radiotherapy that I just described, I went to see the two of them again at that point, and I was expecting them to say to me, "Look, Liam, we're going to book you in now for a scan every 6 months or every 12 months or whatever it is, and you'll be on this medication for the rest of your life or whatever." And Rick, there was nothing. They said to me, "You have rewrote a lot of our cases here. We threw everything at you. We gave you the most complex surgery known, possibly, and radiotherapy wise, I just went off the textbook to find a diagnosis for you." So the result of that was we have nothing left. So that if it does come back, I'm afraid there's nothing more we can do. Now I have to live with that. So when I left, I remember on the boat journey from Liverpool, there was a little bit of me feeling a bit vulnerable. Oh gosh, you know, I'd love to have a scan every 6 months just as a check, but the flip side of that coin is, Rick, I had great finality then with my treatment. Whereas if I did have a scan every 6 months, the night before, no matter how strong you were, it would kick in. You know, you'd say, "Oh, I hope all goes well tomorrow." Whereas I had a lovely kind of bookend with my treatment, and it's done. So that's really where I am. They threw everything at me and to a full stop, nothing more. But if it does come back in any form, there is, you know, I've maxed out on radiotherapy.
Right.
I can't have any more surgery above the chin. But we don't even think about that, and we worry about that when and if it comes, and then we pick up the fight again and we go again and we explore if there are any avenues left.
Like you said, when or if it comes.
Exactly. But even, you know, Rick, I'm no fool. I've had 13 years of the most incredible quality of life that I shouldn't have had a day of. So, you know, if I died tomorrow, I'm sorry, but it would not be a sad story, you know, and that's a very tough thing to say, a very strong thing to say, but that's how big this story is. That you know, I was 54 last month. You know, if I see 60, it'll be extraordinary. So I'm so full of an appreciation and a joy to be alive that really the dying bit has just petered down into not such a big deal anymore. You know, I know that might sound a bit awkward to people, but I'd rather dwell in in the part of my glass that's half full than worry about the bit that's half empty.
Exactly. Yeah? Well, there was one question I was going to answer, but you kind of pretty much answered it. It was, excuse me, what's the one thing that cancer has taken away from you, and what's the one thing that cancer has given you? But I mean, you pretty much answered that.
Yeah, I get. Well, no. Let's dwell on that for a second. You do get people saying cancer is the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, I must admit that's a bit strong, because that means if that was completely true, you'd wish it to happen to you, and nobody does. Nobody wants it. So,
right.
But I have no doubt, I'm a better person today on account of the experience I was through. I have a better grasp of the real things in life, and I do a good job when I speak to corporate people now, even aside from the survival and recovery story. I just switch them into the perspective I now have. I say, look, a failed exam can be repeated, a lost customer account can be replaced, but if you lose your 10 fingers, then you'll really know what you're missing out on. And I say to them, go home tonight and put the news on. Only this time watch it properly. And just swap roles. Put yourself in the shoes of the man in Syria tonight who goes home and his wife and his 4 kids are blown up. Or the woman in the Philippines whose entire village is washed away by a tsunami. And then say to yourself, not being able to change my car this year is a problem, or my son not getting on the basketball team, and you'll have it too, Rick, because you've been through it. But what a pity that in this life we need a crisis to make us see all the wonderful things in our life.
Exactly.
Your bag of troubles is your bag of troubles. So if the only thing you're worried about is your noisy neighbor, then that can just consume you. When really you should be compared to, and none of us have to look too far to find somebody in a worse off scenario, but we lose sight of how grateful we should be to be alive and well, and to be able to walk down the street and have a cup of coffee and to go and see our favorite baseball team, or, so there's a great joy de vivre that comes with survival. You'll have it too, and everybody listening to this will have it, that we can give back to everybody else. I firmly believe that's a role I now have, to switch people back into how good it is to be healthy and to be alive and to have family and friends and rather than worrying about the things you don't have.
Yeah. Well, Liam, your story is absolutely amazing. And for you to go through that and what you've accomplished now and are still accomplishing is just absolutely amazing. The book again is called Cancer 4, Me 5, After Extra Time. There's
a little. It causes a bit of confusion, the title, Rick, but there is a description to it. The 4 represents a stage 4 tumor. Mm-hmm. One consultant told me my tumor should have been called stage 44, which again is a nice little line that's in the book just to explain how grave the case was. And the 5 is the 5 years of remission you have to spend without any recurrence for you to beat that particular cancer. Exactly. So I felt as if cancer threw me a 4 at the very beginning, expecting a 4-0 walkover. And I hadn't won the game until I lived for 5 years and answered him back with a 5. And then 2 things. If you see a 4 or 5 scoreline, say in an ice hockey game, it gives you a fair indication of the game itself. It was a ding-dong affair that probably could have gone either way at the end. So I felt the 4 or 5 scoreline also gave a little insight as to what the battle was. And then finally, I got lots of people were giving me advice on the title, but I didn't want to call it The Hills Are Green in Arizona, or I wanted it to be called You Can Beat Cancer. So I wanted somebody in a little airport in New Zealand or in British Columbia to pick up that book and say, that's the book I'm looking for. Right. Cancer was 4, he was 5, he beat cancer. I also, when I said, don't be afraid of the word. beat the word, not scurry around in fear or in hide of it. Do not be afraid to use that C word and to put it in its place. So the title needed to cover all those things for me. And then, of course, the extra time, which would be overtime over there for you, was the 2 bouts of meningitis. I got a second bout of meningitis when I got back to Ireland, and the deep vein thrombosis. So I just felt between all those things, it was a good little unique title that told a lot in itself.
Well, I think the title is awesome, and I think the book is awesome. And I was kind of wondering what exactly Cancer for Me 5. My girlfriend and I were kind of trying to figure out what exactly Me 5 meant, and I'm glad you explained it to it. I was getting ready to ask you exactly what that actually meant. So thank you for explaining that.
Unfortunately for the poor number 4, a lot of people now read it as the word FOR. So there was a few people saying to me, Cancer for Me 5. What's that all about?
I got you.
It's a 4, a numerical 4,
Right.
and it's a score line. Yeah, so the 4 represents the stage 4 tumor, and the 5 is the 5 years of remission.
Right on. Well, I want to thank you so much. We've gone. I'm sure you could go on forever with this story, and I know that you do a lot of speaking,
That's right. To schools, and again, Rick, it's a mission I have, a duty I have. I don't look for reward to tell this story. I am just so happy to still be here alive to do it. So, and I get lost in it, which I've left out bits, but I've covered most of it. I can angle it if I'm talking to high school kids. I try and get them not to smoke. I'll lift the eye patch and physically show them what cancer did to me. If I'm talking to corporate people, I'll end with perspective, and I'll tell them not to worry about things they worry about compared to what other people in the world have to face. So
exactly.
It's given me a broad license, I think, to just pass on the great things that I've got out of it.
Okay.
Before we do go, I want to thank you too, Rick. You have also done a great job, and by even having this radio show, and you're also not afraid of the C word, and you're giving it to the man as well, and that's what we need to do. That's we have all been given a job to do as survivors, that to show people what can be done.
Exactly.
Nothing to be afraid of. I am the living proof that anything is possible. So I say that to even the severest of cases I meet. I say, look, if I'm here, there is no reason why you can't be here. So
exactly.
And you're doing it too in spades, my man, and you're a great guy, and I'm so delighted to be here today to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much. How can people get a hold of your book, or where can they find you, or I know you're on Facebook.
I have a website based on the book title. It's lemrind5cancer4.com. And I'll be able to load up this radio interview on that. I'm sure. I hope too. They can email me at lemrind5cancer4@gmail.com, and I'm more than happy to post out a book to anybody. And the book is also on Amazon. So, but I respond to every single email I get, Rick, and I encourage as many people as I can to. Just put them in the right frame of mind to go and do it. Go and take this on. And as I say, I fall back on the strength that I had, that even if I did go, the main thing was I fought it all the way to the end. And if you narrow it down to that, that'll keep you very strong. And in a lovely twist, without that mindset, I wouldn't have lived. So almost by not being afraid to die, I lived.
That's a good way to look at it. I'm not
afraid to use strong lines like that to people, just to make sure they're not afraid to take it on and to give it everything they've got.
Well, I want to thank you so much again, Liam, for telling us your story, and I'm definitely going to get this out as soon as I can, and I will send you an email with the link, and maybe if you could, maybe email me some pictures of anything you might have that I can put on my website for my show notes and pics, and thank you again, and I've enjoyed talking to you, and I hope to continue talking to you down the road, my friend.
All the best to you and your family, and great to talk to you, Rick. Take care.
And by the way, Happy New Year.
You too.
All right, Liam. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, my friends, that was quite the story. That was a long one too. Geez, it was an hour and a half now. We went quite a while, but I was interested. I was so intrigued in his story, and that is just an amazing cancer story. I mean, to be able to, the doctors actually lying to you, saying that the 5% chance was actually something they just gave you to grasp onto. They had no idea that you would even, they thought you probably wouldn't survive at all. So that is amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Remember to go to my website, www.laughingwithcancerpodcast.com. Check out my website. Go to my Twitters at laughwithcancer or at Elvis Rico. Go to podcastland.com and give me a vote. Go to iTunes. Give me a 5-star rating and review. Make it a 5-star, though, because if you're going to make it a 1-star, make it a good comment then. You know what I mean? With that said, my friends, Happy New Year. I hope you have a wonderful January. And I'll talk to you guys again soon, all right? Peace, love, and stay laughing.
Laughing with Cancer Podcast.com.